I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to understand how my name had simply disappeared from a document that, up until then, had been mine too. And all I could think was, how did my sister pull that off? I still remember the dry click of the mouse, the silence in my living room, the coffee already cold next to the keyboard, the breeze coming in through the window. That was the moment I realized this was not going to be easy to fix. But it also wasn't going to stay like that. Because when you find out someone in your own family tried to erase you from something that belongs to you too, it stops being just about money. It becomes about how far that person was willing to go. My older sister, back then I still said my sister, without even thinking about it. Hazel, 3 years older than me, had always been more direct, more ambitious, the kind of person who doesn't ask, she takes. And for a long time, I just accepted it. That was just how she was, you know? My name is Patricia Harlan. I'm 34. I work as an administrative analyst for the Arkansas Department of Transportation, and I've always been the kind of woman who keeps things in order without making noise. My life has always been about stability, routine, responsibility. And honestly, I thought that still meant something inside my family. After our mother died 6 months earlier, Hazel and I were left with the house and a modest savings account, nothing that would change anyone's life. But then, something else showed up. An inheritance from our father. A man who had disappeared decades earlier. A lake house. That was when things started to shift between me and her. At first, I didn't think much about the value, but I noticed something in Hazel's eyes. Something sharp, controlled. Like she had already decided how that story was going to end before we even talked about it. And I should have paid more attention to that, because a few days later, when I tried to access the official records, my name wasn't there anymore. Gone. Just like that. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call her yelling. I just set up a dinner at our mother's old house. Same kitchen, same wooden table, the clock on the wall ticking louder than it ever should. When she got there, I placed the papers in front of her. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, looking straight into her eyes. She didn't even try to deny it. "You don't need that house the way I do," she said immediately, like it was obvious. In that moment, I just stared at her face, trying to process what I was hearing. I didn't feel anger right away. It was worse than that. It was emptiness, disappointment. Like something had broken right there in front of me in a way that wasn't going to be fixed. And then I understood everything. That was the moment I decided this was not going to end the way she wanted. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought they could decide what you deserve, leave a like. Sometimes that's the only way. You realize you're not the only one who's been through something like this. Because what I found out after that was a lot deeper than I expected. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the house, but because of the way she said it. Calm. Certain. Like everything was already decided, and I was the only one catching up. The next morning, I opened the county records again. Garland County. Same page. My name still wasn't there. This time, I slowed down. No rush. I went line by line, the same way I do at work when something doesn't add up. That's when I saw it. An attached document. Formal renunciation. With my name on it. I froze for a second, my hand still on the mouse, not moving. Because I knew. I had never signed anything like that. I opened the file. My full name. A signature that looked like mine. Even a notary stamp. Clean. Too clean. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, trying not to react too fast. But one thing was already clear. This wasn't a mistake. Someone built that. And suddenly, the dinner from the night before felt different. The way she didn't hesitate. The way she didn't explain. She already knew. I closed the document and checked the timeline. Recently filed. Processed way too fast. Fast enough to feel wrong. Because I work with state systems. I know how slow things move. Nothing just goes through like that. Unless someone makes it go through. I grabbed my phone and opened our messages. Nothing. No warning. No conversation. Just normal replies. Until silence after that dinner. Blocked. I exhaled slowly. Interesting, I said under my breath, more to organize my thoughts than anything else. Because now it wasn't just about what she did. It was about how, and who helped her do it. I pulled out a notebook and started writing everything down. Dates, files, small details most people would ignore. That's when I saw the name, an attorney, from Hot Springs. I paused, pen in the air. I had never heard that name before, and she had never mentioned hiring anyone. That was the shift, because until that moment, part of me still wanted to believe this was emotional, impulsive. But this was planned, clean, deliberate. I closed the notebook slowly and sat there for a second. Same room, same window. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now I wasn't trying to understand what happened. I was starting to understand what she was capable of. I didn't call her again after that. There was nothing left to say. And I wasn't about to give her time to adjust her story. Instead, I went back to the records. That attorney's name kept bothering me. So I looked him up. Nothing impressive. No major firm. Just a small office in Hot Springs, basic contact info, almost no real presence, which made it worse. Because people who work clean usually leave a trace. This felt quiet on purpose. I called the number listed. A woman answered. "Law office," she said, fast and flat. "I'm calling about a filing connected to my name," I said. "I just need to confirm a few details." There was a pause. Short, but noticeable. "You'd need to submit a formal request," she replied. "We can't disclose that over the phone." "Of course," I said. "Can you at least confirm whether this office handled a renunciation filing recently?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I can't confirm that. Too polished. Too careful." "All right," I said. "Thank you." And I hung up. I kept staring at the phone for a second, because that wasn't a normal call. That was someone measuring every word. I've worked around public systems long enough to know when someone is being cautious, and when someone is hiding behind procedure. She was hiding. I opened my notebook and added one more line under the attorney's name. Office evasive. Controlled answers. Then something else clicked. Hazel didn't just find a lawyer. She found the kind of lawyer who knows how to make things move quietly. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. At that point, I could have filed something official and waited. Months, probably. But this wasn't just a dispute anymore. This was something built to look legitimate. And if I played it the normal way, I was already behind. So I grabbed my bag. Because if Hazel thought I was going to sit there and accept it, then she really didn't know me at all. I drove to Hot Springs the next morning without telling anyone. It was about an hour from Little Rock, enough time for everything to settle in my head. And the more I replayed that dinner, the clearer one thing became. Hazel wasn't nervous. She wasn't defensive. She was comfortable. People only act like that when they think they're protected. The office was exactly what I expected. Small building, neutral sign, nothing that called attention. I parked across the street and watched for a minute before going in. The same woman from the phone was at the front desk. She looked up, and for half a second, I saw recognition before she covered it. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I think we spoke yesterday," I said. "About a filing connected to my name." Her expression barely changed, but her posture did. "I mentioned you'd need a formal request." "I'm not here to request documents," I said calmly. "I'm here to confirm whether my signature was processed through this office." She looked at me for a second, then down at the desk. "If you have concerns, you need to go through the appropriate legal channels." It was a clean answer. Too clean. I let the silence sit for a moment, then said, "If my signature was used without my authorization, that becomes a different kind of problem." This time she didn't answer right away. I watched her swallow before she spoke. "I recommend you talk to an attorney," she said, quieter now. That was all I needed. Not a denial. Just distance. I thanked her and walked out without making a scene. Once I got back in the car, I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine yet. Because now it was starting to take shape. And for the first time since all this began, I wasn't just reacting. I was getting ahead of it. On the drive back, I left the radio off. I needed silence. Not the kind that clears your head, the kind that puts things in order. Because that visit confirmed what I needed to know. This wasn't just paperwork. It was coordinated. And if it was coordinated, it left traces. When I got home, I dropped my bag on the chair and went straight to the table with my notebook. I read everything again. Dates, names, timing, little details that hadn't seemed important at first, but started connecting once I looked at them together. That's when I noticed the pattern. There was nothing official tying Hazel to that attorney in the filing itself, which made sense. But Hazel wasn't the kind of person who could pull something like this off alone. And whatever she did, she paid for it somehow. I opened my laptop and checked what I still had access to. Old shared records, transfer history, anything that hadn't been locked down yet. At first, nothing. Then I saw it. Small amounts, spread out over time. Not high enough to draw attention, but regular enough to mean something. Different dates. Same destination pattern. I leaned closer to the screen. That wasn't random. That was planned. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Not because I thought it would disappear right away, but because I didn't trust memory anymore. At that point, I knew I couldn't do this alone. Not because I wasn't capable, but because this had already crossed into something technical, something built to survive a first glance. So I looked for someone quiet, someone experienced. A retired investigator out of Pulaski County. No flashy website, just a number. I stared at it for a second, then called. He answered on the third ring. Yeah. I need help understanding something that doesn't make sense on paper, I said. There was a short pause. Then he said, Come prepared. I don't chase guesses. I won't, I answered, and I meant it. Because by then, I wasn't just trying to prove I was right. I was building something she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of. And honestly, how many people get away with things just because everyone else gets tired first? If you want to stay with me through the rest of this, subscribe. Because what I found next stopped looking like family conflict and started looking like fraud. I met him the next day. No office, no front desk. Just a quiet diner off the highway, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. He was already there when I walked in. Older, calm. The kind of man who looked like he noticed everything without showing it. You, Patricia? He asked. I am. I sat across from him and slid the copies over. Bank patterns, filing dates, the attorney's name. He looked at me first. Tell me what you think happened, he said. I took a breath. My sister removed me from a legal inheritance using a document I never signed, I said. And she didn't do it alone. He nodded once and started reading. For a minute, he said nothing. Then he stopped at the transfers. Structured, he said. Not sloppy. Something settled in me when I heard that. Not relief. Confirmation. So I'm not imagining this, I said. No, he replied. You're late. I held that for a second. Late how? He leaned back and finally looked at me. Whoever did this expected you'd find out eventually, he said. The real question is how much distance they built before you caught up. That hit harder than I expected, because I'd been focused on proving what happened. He was already thinking ahead. What do we do? I asked. He looked back at the filing. This attorney, he said. You contacted the office? I did. And? Too careful. He gave a small nod. Good, he said. That means there's something to protect. He circled the name with his pen. We don't start with your sister, he said. We start with the structure. I stayed quiet, letting that sink in. Because if this falls apart, he added, tapping the paper once, what she says after won't matter. That was the first moment everything shifted. I wasn't just trying to confront Hazel anymore. I was getting ready to pull apart what she built. And for the first time since this started, I felt something clearer than anger. I felt control. I didn't contact Hazel. Not after that meeting. Not after everything started making sense in a different way. Because at that point, talking to her wouldn't give me anything new. It would only warn her, and I was done doing that. Instead, I followed his lead. Start with the structure. That stayed in my head, so I went back to everything again. But this time, not like someone trying to understand. Like someone trying to break it. The filing, the signature, the timeline, and then the money. Because if that document was fake, and the process was pushed through, someone had to be paid to make it happen, and payments always leave something behind, even when they try not to. I sent him everything I had, every screenshot, every date, every transfer. He didn't respond right away, which for some reason made me trust him more. By the end of the day, my phone rang. "Yeah," he said. "I'm here." "I found your entry point," he added. I didn't say anything. I just listened. "The payments weren't just structured," he continued. "They were split across 2 paths." I sat up a little straighter. "What does that mean?" "It means your sister didn't just pay once," he said. "She made sure it didn't look like payment at all." A pause. "Part went direct," he added. "Small amounts, just like you saw." "And the other part?" Another pause. "Through someone else." I felt my grip tighten slightly around the phone. "Who?" "Still tracing," he said. "But it connects back to that office." That was it. That was the moment everything locked into place. Because up until then, part of me still held on to something small. Some version of this that wasn't as calculated as it looked. But this? This was layered, intentional, and clean enough to pass if no one looked too closely. I looked out the window, not really seeing anything. Because now I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. This wasn't about impulse. This wasn't about emotion. This was a decision, built step by step. And I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with someone who thought this would hold. And maybe it would have. If I had stopped where she expected me to. I stopped thinking of it as a situation. It was a system. And systems fail when you find the right point of pressure. The next 2 days were quiet on the outside, but not underneath. I went to work, answered emails, followed my routine. No one would have noticed anything different. But in between all of that, I was building something. Piece by piece. He called again late in the afternoon. "I got a name," he said. I didn't react right away. I just leaned back in my chair, already expecting that moment. "Who?" I asked. "Someone inside the office," he replied, "not the attorney." I stayed quiet. "A secretary," he added. "She handled intake and document routing." That made sense. Not the face, the function. "Can we reach her?" I asked. Another short pause. "Already did." That caught my attention. "And?" "She talks," he said, "but not for free." Of course. Nothing in that process was accidental. "How much?" I asked. "Enough to make her hesitate," he replied. "Not enough to make her disappear." I almost smiled at that. Precise. "What does she have?" I asked. "Confirmation," he said. "And more than that, sequence." I felt that word settle. Sequence meant timeline. Timeline meant structure. Structure meant proof. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," he said. "You'll want to be there." I looked at the time on my screen. 6:12 p.m. Everything about my day still looked normal, but it wasn't anymore. "Send me the address," I said. He hung up without another word. I sat there for a second, staring at nothing. Because this was the first real crack. Not suspicion, not pattern. Something concrete. And at the same time, something else crossed my mind. Hazel still thought I was behind. Still thought I was confused. Still thought I was reacting. I picked up my phone and opened our old messages again. Still blocked. No movement. No concern. I closed the screen slowly. Enjoy that, I said under my breath, because that version of the story was about to end. The place wasn't an office, just a small cafe off a side street in Hot Springs, quiet enough that nobody paid attention to anyone else. He was already there when I walked in, and so was she. Mid-30s maybe, shoulders tight, one hand wrapped around a coffee cup like she needed something to do with it. I sat down across from them, and he placed a small recorder on the table without making a show of it. Then he kept it simple. Either she told the truth, or we left. She nodded right away, but I could see she was still deciding how much she was willing to say. At first, she tried to protect herself, said she hadn't created anything, only processed what came in. I told her I wasn't there for excuses. I needed facts. That was when her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough for me to know she understood this wasn't going away. She admitted the filing had come through differently from the start. It had already been marked for fast handling before it even reached her desk. According to her, that kind of thing only happened when someone inside wanted it moved quietly and without delay. She never said it like a confession. She said it like someone finally getting tired of pretending not to see what was obvious. When I asked about the signature, she looked down for a second before answering. Then she said the part that mattered most. It didn't match. Not cleanly. Not enough to feel real to anyone paying attention. She noticed it, and she let it go. I asked why she hadn't reported it. Her answer was immediate this time. It wasn't her risk to take. That was the moment it all settled in. Not because I was surprised anymore, but because I finally had it from someone who had seen the document move from the inside. Not theory, not instinct. Something concrete. He turned off the recorder, and none of us said much after that. We didn't need to. By then, the silence felt more useful than questions. When I stood up to leave, I wasn't carrying doubt anymore. Just evidence. And the very clear sense that Hazel had gone all in on the belief that no one would ever pull the structure apart far enough to reach her. By the time I got back to Little Rock, everything was already in motion. Not loudly, not publicly, but precisely. I didn't confront Hazel again. There was no point in repeating that scene. She had already said what she believed, and, more importantly, she thought it was enough. So I let her stay comfortable. For a little longer. The investigator handled the next steps with a kind of quiet efficiency I respected. The statement from the secretary was documented, the financial traces were organized, the inconsistencies in the filing were lined up in a way that didn't leave space for interpretation. Everything clean, everything factual. And then it moved where it needed to go. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no long speeches. Just facts being placed, one after the other, in front of people who were trained to see exactly what those facts meant. I sat there, hands resting on my lap, posture steady, listening as the timeline was laid out. The transfers, the document, the internal handling, each piece connecting to the next without effort. At one point, Hazel tried to speak. Not aggressively, not emotionally. Controlled. Like she still believed she could manage the situation if she stayed calm enough. But the problem wasn't her tone, it was the structure she built. And once that started to fall, there was nothing left for her to hold. The attorney distanced himself first. That told me everything. Then came the confirmation that the document had no valid origin tied to me. No legitimate authorization, no legal standing. Clean. Final. I didn't look at her right away, not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't need to. I already knew what I would see. When I finally did, she wasn't looking at me. She was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, like she was still trying to process where it stopped being fixable. And I understood that feeling. I had felt it too. Just not like this. The outcome was exactly what it needed to be. The property didn't stay with either of us. It went to judicial sale, divided after penalties, fees, and everything that came with what she tried to do. Less than what it could have been, but fair. Consequences followed her after that. Not loud ones, not dramatic, Real ones. Professional, financial, social, the kind that stay. As for me, I sold what I had from the original estate and moved to Conway. Smaller place. Mine. Quiet in a way that actually feels peaceful. No tension, no second guessing. Just space. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that some people don't cross a line by accident. They calculate it. They justify it. And they convince themselves it will hold. Until it doesn't. So I'm curious. Have you ever watched someone go too far, thinking no one would ever push back? I'd really like to know how that ended for you. And if this story made you think of someone who might need to hear it, you can share it with them. Some things don't look wrong at first, until you see how they were built.